Let's paint a tree with acrylics. I've got some mixed media paper by Canson. I'm using a palette pad to mix my paints, and I've got a regular round brush. I've got 2 cups of water here to clean my brush, and I've got a palette knife to mix my paint, but you don't need this. The colors I'm using today are crimson, cadmium yellow, cobalt blue hue, burnt umber, Mars black, and titanium white. First and foremost, I'm going to paint in the background. That's going to be a blue sky, which is my cobalt blue hue and titanium white mixed together. I sometimes like to add in a little bit of yellow to calm down the saturation of the cobalt, but because I want the brown of the tree to stand out, I'm not going to do that today. Brown has a lot of yellow in it. Not only do I want there to be a high value contrast, I also want there to be a high contrast between the hues, which in this case is going to be the blue of the sky and the yellow of the tree trunk. I try to create contrast in as many ways as possible to really make my subjects pop. I'm creating clouds just by adding a little bit of titanium white and letting that mix directly into the blue of the sky. I'm not going to spend too long on this, the tree is going to cover it up anyway. Okay, for now I'm going to make the ground green, but I might change that later because I'm going to be drawing an African tree today. Regardless, I'm going to use some cadmium yellow and blue and some titanium white, mix that together. Now I'm just going to paint in the ground. Okay, I'm gonna wait for this to dry. It's been 10 minutes, let's start on our tree. So usually I recommend pre-mixing your colors, but today we're painting something organic, so let's let this subject matter guide the way that we actually paint it. That means I'm gonna mix most of these colors as I go. If you're using oil paints, I'd be very careful doing this technique. It's very easy to get a muddy image, but I'm using acrylics today, and as you know, acrylics dry very fast, so I can layer these colors without worrying about blending them. Gonna go with some burnt sienna and titanium white and Mars black. Just gonna create the general shape of this tree, a nice dark silhouette. Lovely, let's start building out the form of the tree. I'm gonna add some red and yellow and titanium white. Now I'm just going to paint in the highlights of the tree trunk. You don't have to draw this particular tree, you can draw whatever shape that you want. The tree that I'm painting today, its bark twists as it grows. So I'm going to want to make sure that all the texture runs in a twisting fashion. Because tree trunks are cylinders, most of the shadows are form shadows, which means they transition from dark to light gradually. Let's add some texture. The texture is a little brighter, so I'm adding some titanium white and some yellow. And I'm just trying to focus on painting shapes instead of lines. And because I'm using acrylic paints, it's okay if I screw up. The layers dry so fast, I can always fix it later. And besides, the more layers I add to the painting, the more alive it's gonna feel. And when you're mixing colors as you go along, I'd go so far as to say you have to screw up a little bit because you need to build up the layers before you really nail the color of the image. The layers underneath always affect the layers on top when you're painting. Even when it doesn't really feel like it, it's a great way to inject some life into an otherwise very simple painting. Just keep layering those hues and values and watch it come alive. Again, I'm painting big shapes and not individual leaves, and I want you to think about the leaves as a big sphere because there's a general gradient from the light side to the dark side. Okay, lovely. I'm going to add some more shadows, and I'm adding some highlights to the leaves as well. And what really sells it is adding the sky color back in between the leaves as if it's poking through. Okay, I'm going back down to the trunk and adding some more detail. At a certain point, you kind of have to make a decision as to what the value structure looks like on the bark. In simple terms, that's picking a dark hue, picking a middle hue, picking a highlight, and letting those 3 colors define every single ridge on the trunk. Now, I don't mean robotically add in a highlight and a midtone and a shadow to every single crack and crevice of the tree, but I do mean suggest it. And this is kind of the beauty of painting. You can suggest detail with abstract shapes, and that's why I always say paint shapes, not lines. So I want you to go through and suggest the highlights and suggest the midtones and suggest the shadows. In practice, it looks like this. Now I'm just going through and adding the highlights and the shadows and the midtones, and I'm trying to be organic about it because this is an organic shape that we're trying to create. I'm going to desaturate the ground because this kind of tree doesn't live among greenery, but there is vegetation, so it's a good thing that I have the green down there because it's going to show through a little bit even if I put a desaturated brown on top. I'm going to go back into the leaves and just add some more highlights. So far I've created this whole painting using a single round brush, and you should be doing the same. Let me tell you a story. When I was younger, I wanted to learn how to paint trees, and I watched a tutorial on how to paint trees, and the guy told me, you need a fan brush. What did I do? I went out and I bought a fan brush, but the fan brush was not the key to painting trees. I fundamentally didn't understand what I was doing when I was painting the tree. I thought, oh, the fan brush is going to solve that problem. Wrong. What I needed to do was take a step back and fundamentally try to understand what I was trying to do. And what I was trying to do was paint the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. If you understand that, and I can't say this enough, it does not matter what brush you use. Mic drop. I got paint everywhere. But anyway, that's basically it. I did end up using a finer brush just to highlight all those nooks and crannies in the trunk. Let me know if there's anything else you want to learn. Now get out of here and go make some art.